Petrocina. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm just gonna get your voice.
Okay. May 25th, 1887, he was born in Petrocina. And his mother was Giuseppe, and his father was Zia Orizio. And from the moment they had him, the very day one, he was tantalized by the devil and tortured from when he was a newborn baby. And because of that, he would never be able to stay with the family. He always stayed at his grandma's house, his Nonna Gagliardi house at night, because if you've ever been, anyone been to Petrocina? But if you were, their house was probably no bigger than the inside of this little square. So they ate and slept in the same room. You know, they all had their little mattresses made out of feather pillows. But because they worked, they were farmers and they worked in the fields, having this newborn baby that was constantly screaming and yelling, Grandma Gagliardi always would take care of him. And I had the opportunity to go to Petrocina. And when I walked out of the bus, this man grabbed me and started kissing my cheeks. And I'm like, whoa. And he was talking in Italian and he kept saying Gagliardi, Gagliardi. And I should tell you that my grandma was a Gagliardi. So somehow, I can't say for sure, but there just seems to be a coincidence of the Gagliardi, and how he knew I was a Gagliardi, I don't know. Holy Spirit. So he ended up taking me to Nana's Gagliardi's home while I was there. So not only did I get to see Padre Pio's home, but I did get to go to the grandma who had to take care of him so often. And even in their house, in the middle of their floor, there was a trap, and underneath is the stable where the animals lived. So their beds were made out of chicken and duck feathers. And just recently I went to New Jersey, and a man who was friends of Padre Pio's family, his dad was married in Petrocina, and Maria Giuseppe, Padre Pio's mother, as a wedding gift, because everybody was so poor there, poor, that they gave, and I forgot to bring them, they gave him as a wedding gift the pillow and mattress of Padre Pio. And when they moved to New Jersey, they couldn't bring the mattress, but they brought the pillow. And when I was in New Jersey a few weeks ago, his son realized that these are relics of Padre Pio. So his dad died, and so did the man, and they were given to his friend. And his friend gave me a big bag full of pillows of feathers and part of the pillowcase. So I'm working on making these second-class relics to give to people. So anyhow, that's just a little sidebar about Padre Pio. His name was Francesco Borgione, and he, even as a child, he was always sick. He was always sick. So they went to work in the fields, and as a little boy, he would work as a farmer, tending the sheep. And many times again, the devil would tantalize him all the time. He wanted to become a priest, and you know why he wanted to be a Capuchin priest? Because he loved the beard. And I think I'm getting so close to Padre Pio that I start to get whispers. Where is this? Is this part of old age, or is he trying to give me a beard? I don't know. But anyhow, so anyhow, I was about 14 years old when he went into the novitiate, and he went with his friend. His name was Mazzoni, and he went there, and after 6 weeks, they kicked his friend out. and said, no, no, you're not. You were really not. Wasn't Mazzoni, I'm trying to think of his name. That's not the right name. But he says, no, you're not you're not the material to be a priest. So he ended up marrying Padre Pio's sister, Felicita. And the man who was kissing me was his grandson.
Oh.
So that's sort of how the introduction of how Padre Pio's with me every single day. And I'll now share how I was introduced to him. He, I just briefly tell you that I was an orphan and I was adopted when I was 11 months old to a very good Holy Catholic family. And from that day on, I was treated like a princess. Um, Later in my journey, I met this woman. Her name is Irina Gaeta. She started the Disciples of Padre Pio through the Vatican. And when she met me, she said that Padre Pio had come to her night before and told her she was going to meet me. Now, this woman only speaks Italian. So I got this message through her interpreter. And she said that you're to be the US ambassador for Padre Pio. And she had me sign papers and they were all in Italian. And I'm thinking, I must be signing my house away. Who knows what I'm signing? But anyhow, she said that Padre Pio came to her and told her that she was going to meet me and that my biological grandparents were very, very holy people. They attended daily mass. They received the Eucharist and they prayed the rosary, many rosaries a day. And so when I was conceived, the Blessed Mother had assigned Padre Pio to watch over me. And I'm still sticking with that story because it's a pretty good story. But anyhow, I grew up with a beautiful family. As little kids, instead of playing house, our neighborhood kids, we played mass every day, 12 o'clock noon at Tommy Draga's parents' basement, and we had the vanilla wafers and the Welch's grape juice, and we celebrated mass. And the girls all wore towels because we were sisters. And Tommy was the priest. Well, it turned out that Tommy became a priest, and he's a pastor up in Solon, Catholic priest. So again, for the girls, well, none of us became sisters, but we had good upbringing about daily mass, even though we did, we're just little kids. I met my high school sweetheart when I was 15 years old. It was love at first sight. I grabbed my girlfriend. I met him at a dance and I said, I just met the man I'm going to marry. And at 20 years old, we got married. And he was Italian and German, but mostly Italian. And that's how my life started. I can remember our wedding day. I was so scared because we were 20 years old and his high school coach married us. And I could just remember going to Mary and crying and praying, because I had no clue what it was going to be like to be married or a mother or a wife, or I was a princess. I was spoiled my whole entire life. Hi, come on in. So anyhow, I had such a good husband. And again, we were blessed to have children. I had Rocco, Dino, Gino. And then my grandchildren are Massimo, Delphina, Gianna, Dino Gaetana, Rosie, and Walter. But we were that Italian family from when I was a young girl. My grandma lived with us, pasta every Sunday. My husband, he made Italian sausage, homemade wine, and everybody gathered. And no matter how many people showed up, there was always enough food. And, it's sad because it's not like that anymore. Families kind of barely get together. If you get together at the holidays, you're lucky. But most families are so busy that to get everybody together for a Sunday meal just doesn't seem to be in existence anymore. And with all the stores open on Sunday, we've kind of forgot about Sunday is the day of rest. So anyhow, so my husband was such a good man and he was on fire with the church. And I kept thinking, what Kool-Aid did he drink? Because I couldn't get him away from the church. And he was like he was a grand knight. He was the faithful navigator. They were actually grooming him for a position at national level. So, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand. And he started Christ Renews his parishes. He started rosary rallies. He was on fire. From when I was little, I was just very devoted to Mary. I loved Mary. And as a little girl, my dresser was a May altar of Mary. And the statue was actually what I came out of the orphanage with, a statue of Mary, an undershirt, and a diaper. And so Mary, I would crown her. I would pick lilies of the valley and my May crowning, and I needed her when I got married, and I needed her when I was pregnant with the children. So Mary and I have a very close relationship, and it, but I still wasn't quite there. So my husband allowed my parents to move in, and my parents lived with us for 20 years. So it takes a special husband to allow in-laws in, and we had a suite. And we all got along wonderful. It was just, my children had the best of both worlds. They had the grandma and grandpa who gave them everything in the world, and then they had the mean parents who were the disciplinarians. And my dad contracted cancer, multiple myeloma, and I had the honor of taking care of him. I didn't work, so I was home, and I took care of him till his last day. And I remember the last words he said to me when he was dying was, "Cindy, always remember you were conceived in my heart. And I love you." And then he died. So my husband said, it's time. Let me drink something. I'm getting hoarse already. It's time to become one with Italy. We do all this Italian stuff. We got to go to Italy. So he booked us a cruise, Spain, France, and Italy. And right before I was ready to leave, I got a call from my cousin. Now, my dad was Polish and my mom was Italian. So this was the Polish side. And she said that her grandson, Noah, who was 3 years old, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and that there's no hope. And this was the fall of 2010. And I just said, why don't you give me pictures of Noah? And I'm sure in Spain, France, and Italy, I'm going to see lots of churches. And I'll just put his picture. And on the back, we wrote, "Please pray for Noah as he battles cancer." So we went to Spain, we did it France and Italy, and finally we're in Rome. Yay, I was excited. And we went to the Trevi Fountain, like every good tourist does. And what do you do at the Trevi? You throw the coins. And as I was backwards and I was throwing the coin, right diagonal on the other side was a church. And it was called St. Vincenzo and Anastasia. And I told my husband, I'm going to go in there and leave Noah's picture. And if I found the candle, then I'd light a candle. My husband was so enamored with the fountain. And by now, he probably took about 1,200 pictures of our trip. So I left him and I had a small bottle like this. And I emptied it and I took from the spigot of the Trevi. I thought, oh, I'm going to take a souvenir home. I'll take Trevi water home. And back then, TSA wasn't really a big thing then. So I had my bottle in my purse and I started walking up the steps. And as I went up the steps, a stranger was next to me. And we walked up and there's this big black round door. We open it and I walk in, and standing there is, I think, a priest. I'm not sure. Never seen anybody dressed like that. But he had a brown robe and a cord and a beard. And he looked at the man next to me, the stranger who walked in with me. And in the nastiest, the dirtiest look, he kicked him out of the church. Real angry. And I went, you do is I want to pivot and take off because I shouldn't be in this church. And that's when it happened. It was as though the whole world stopped. And through the floor, through my feet, I could feel this tingling, this fire, this electricity going up me. And as it was going up, up. And they say when you die that you get a motion picture of your life. Well, that's what I was experiencing through this. I saw a motion picture of my life. It was black and white, and it showed me everything I had done bad in my life, all my sins. And I had not been to confession for 20 years, so there was a lot to see. And I was so sad, and I was crying, and I was telling Jesus how sorry I was. And all of a sudden, these tears just came out like tears I've never seen before. And I had just lost my dad, but these tears were different. They just flowed and flowed. Well, I now know the fire and electricity was the Holy Spirit. And I know that what I seen is called the illumination of conscience. And the tears is another gift from the Holy Spirit called the gift of tears. And I looked at this man and I said, please, and I handed him Noah's picture. And I said, please, please pray for Noah. He's very sick. And the man grabbed my hands and he walked me over to the back of the church. And there was this shell, big shell, and like an oyster shell, big one, clamshell. And he took water and he poured it over me. And 3 times he blessed me, saying some words in Italian. And then he took Noah's picture and he blessed Noah's picture. Well, meanwhile, when I say like the world stopped, the world had stopped, and it was just me and this guy who I thought was a priest, but wasn't sure who he was. So then I was crying and crying, and he blessed Noah's picture. He put it in the robe of his pocket, and then he took the tips of his fingers and he started wiping my tears. And I had huge crocodile tears. And I was so sorry. I was on fire. Like I didn't understand what this heat was coming from. And I was shaking and I was so sorry. And he kept wiping my cheeks and telling me, no cry, no cry. Noah will be healed. And then I kept crying, and then he took his fingers and he was trying to make me smile. And he said all this in Italian, and I don't speak it, but I understood every word he said to me. And then he walked over to the table and picked up a holy card, and he told me I needed to pray this prayer every day. It was the Memorare. But at the time I didn't know it was in Italian. I found that out later. And then the holy card, the picture was called Madonna de Puzzo, Madonna at the well. So I bowed and I said, grazie. And I ran out of the church, down the steps, down to my husband, soaking wet. And my husband looks at me and said, did you fall in the fountain? And I said, no, there was this guy. I think he's a priest. I don't know who he is, but he did this to me. And he's like, well, it's about time somebody gave you an exorcism. Maybe you'll be good. And so off we went. But that fire, that electricity, that tingling, that heat, that shaking, to this day, that fire's still with me. And so we went, and it's back on our tour. So on our tour, a half hour later, we get at a piazza and it's lunchtime. And what do you do at lunch? You order some pizza, maybe a little vino. It's just, Italy's just wonderful. So instead of doing that, I'm not here to eat. I'm here to shop. I'm in Italy. So we go into the first gift shop we see, and I walk in, and there's a picture on the wall to the left of me, and I freeze. And my husband said, what's wrong with you? He goes, you look like you've seen a ghost. I said, I didn't see a ghost. That's the guy. He goes, no, it can't be. I said, that's the guy who did this to me. He must be like famous in Rome, maybe a Monsignor or something. And he said, no, Cindy, no. He's a saint. He's dead. His name is Padre Pio. And I said, no way, no way would a saint appear to me. I'm so bad. There is no way a saint would appear to me. And those things don't happen in this age. That happened when people were good, like Fatima children and Lord Lucy. I said, no way, no way. And he said, no, that's who it is. Well, my big regret was that I did not buy the picture because I didn't believe. So we walked out of there and then we went to the Vatican. That was our next stop. And at the Vatican, laying in state, incorrupt, was Pope, now he's a saint, John the 23rd. And he was laying in a glass tomb. I remember his red fuzzy slippers, velvet slippers. And I'm like, how could this man be dead? He looks like he's sleeping and he died in the 60s. So I knelt down and I just wept and I wept and I wept. And my husband said, come on, we're going to be late for our tour. I'm like, you go, I'm staying here. And all I could tell you was what I felt radiate out of this tomb was this love, this peace that I've been loved my whole life. But this love was different. This peace, like he came back after an hour and he said, come on, we got to go. I'm like, no, I'm staying here forever. He says, you're in the Vatican. You can't stay here forever. I said, I'm staying here forever. This love and this peace. And he literally dragged me off a kneeler and got me on the bus. And then the whole trip was like that. I was a mess. I'm usually funny and silly and happy-go-lucky and smart. I just could not stop crying every second. I could not stop crying. So we finally are on the flight coming home. I got silent. Sorry, squirm a little bit. And we were coming home and I said, now when we get home, don't tell anybody this because they're going to think I'm absolutely crazy out of my mind. Well, he went home and told the pastor immediately, and then word kept spreading. And I still did not believe. I didn't believe. And then a few days later, my mom got ill and she ended up at Marymount. All my stories have something to do with Mary. So Marymount, and they admitted her. And so when I was leaving about 10 o'clock at night, I went into their chapel and I can say a prayer for my mom. And as I walked in front of the altar was a 3-foot statue of him. And I thought, it spooked me. And I ran out of the church chapel and I ran into my cousin and I said, he's in there because she had heard the story. He's in there. So she's walking in with me thinking he's going to be standing there. And it was a statue. And she said, I've worked at this hospital for 11 years. There has never been a statue put in front of the altar. But I'll ask the sisters, I'll ask the chaplain who did this. So after I said my prayers and I got in my car, I'm looking in my rearview mirror thinking, this cat followed me home. And what does he want from me? Why did he follow me from Italy? So the next day she said, no, nobody knows why that statue's there. Nobody knows who put it there. But every day, whoever came to visit my mom in the hospital, we would all end up at that chapel praying. And then on Friday, we came home and I got a call from my cousin and she said, the chaplain wants to know, did you take that statue? It disappeared. They don't know who put it there. They don't know how it disappeared, but it was gone. So the next day, my husband said, please, let's go to a religious shop, Grismer's, and we're going to get you a statue. I wasn't so sure. I don't know if I really like this guy or not. He kind of scared me. So anyhow, we go and they do not have a statue, but they have a book called Padre Pio, True Story by Bernard Ruffin, which, sidebar, I've met him a few times. And he said if he ever would have written another book, he would have added my story to the book. And then he passed away. So anyhow, I grabbed the book and I said, my husband said, Cindy, you have never read a book, even in high school. Cliff Notes were your friend. And I said, I'm going to read this. It had 500 pages. Well, I could not put that book down. The first thing I read was that Padre Pio's feast day was September 23rd. That was the day I was in that church on his feast day. The second thing I read was that his grandmother on his mother's side was a Gagliardi. And like I told you, I'm a Gagliardi. And then I read that the third coincidence, or I call them God incidents, was that the first woman who he had started Padre Pio prayer groups, her name was Russo, Rachelina Russo. So this was like all too much for me. But as I kept reading this book, the thing that really, really stuck out to me, and I think for most of you, is how much he suffered. He suffered every day of his life, and he gave 100%, just like Jesus gave us 100%. Padre Pio gave us 100% of his suffering, and he had the wounds like Jesus. And he was tortured all the time by the devil. So anyhow, I kind of made a little promise to God. Well, if you heal Noah, I'll take on some of Padre Pio's suffering. Don't recommend to do that because watch what you ask for. So I called my cousin and I said, Donna, I got good news. Noah's going to be healed. And she said, why do you say that? I said, because you won't believe this. I ran into a saint and his name's Padre Pio. And she goes, stop it. And I said, what? She said, my father's been praying a 9-day novena to Padre Pio. This is the priest he asked for help, was through Padre Pio. And she said, I need a hall. Here we go. And so she said, he's been praying a 9-day novena. He's had a devotion since he's been a little boy. She says, don't you remember when you stayed over the statue on his dresser? I said, no, I don't remember that. So he's been devoted to Padre Pio. So, okay. Well, the next thing we knew, Donna calls and tells me that Noah's healed. The doctors can't explain it. There was no hope. His cancer had gone through his whole system, and now he's completely healed. But there's more to that whole story. So my uncle was very devoted to Padre Pio, but my aunt was very devoted to Pope John Paul. And when he came to Cleveland, she was the housekeeper and cook at St. Stanislaus. So she was, and she's Polish. So she was the one who picked him up at the airport and they became friends. She could speak Polish. They became better friends. And then when he tasted her cooking, it was authentic. So they became very good friends. Well, reading in this book that Bernard wrote, that John Paul was a young priest, cardinal, well, he was a Father Watoya back then, and he heard about Padre Pio. So he went to see Padre Pio in San Giovanni, and Padre Pio told him that one day you're going to be Pope, and I see blood. You're going to be suffering very badly. And that truly had happened. But whenever Cardinal Watoya would want a special intention for someone sick back in Poland, he would write a letter to Padre Pio, and Padre Pio never had to open a letter. He knew what exactly they said, and he said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And they actually used those letters for his beatification and canonization. So since then, Padre Pio has become, as I said, he's like every day sometimes I see him in this form, and then other times I see him in light, and I could show you some of my pictures because the priests, when I've seen him on altars, and I'll say, oh, Father, he's here, and they're like, Cindy, take a picture because we can't see him. I see him. I've had many things, statues that come to life. We have at our church a head of Padre Pio that bleeds during Mass and oil comes out of it. So we anoint the sick. Like I don't announce it. They just know they could go up to that statue and bless themselves with the oil. We've had many, many miraculous things happen. And it's just been amazing. What's more amazing is that sometimes it goes generation to generation. So after this all happened, and I'm finally believing that, yeah, Padre Pio appeared to me, it was like I started running into some relatives of his. Like everywhere I went, it was Padre Pio, Padre Pio. And I'm like, okay, I get it, I get it. And then it was New Year's Eve, and my husband decided that he was going to go visit my son, our prodigal son. He gave us a run for our money as a teenager and young adult, and we finally said, no, stop. And so we asked him to leave our home, and he grew up. He grew up and he became very successful down in Florida. So my husband was traveling on a whim to go down and bring my car. He was into car sales and that he was going to trade my car in. And I'm like, no, I love my car. Just no. And I said, if you want to go visit him, just fly. Well, he got up New Year's Eve morning and he started driving. And from that moment he started driving, I kept smelling this terrible scent. It was like lemon, lime, pine salt scent. And it was I just kept saying, please, would you stop, get a hotel? He would not. He just kept driving. And in the morning, I got a call, a knock on my door, and it was from a sheriff. My husband fell asleep at the wheel and died. So I truly believe that that was part of my suffering that I asked for. So watch what you ask for. And, I talked to a priest about it, and he said, Cindy, we can't choose. When you say you're going to suffer, we can't choose. God chooses. What would be your greatest suffering? The loss of my husband. And when I say I had a marriage in heaven, I really did. So I said, well, I wouldn't have prayed for that if I knew, but that's one of my crosses, and we all have crosses. If I go around this room, each one of you could tell us a cross that you have. But it's what you do with that cross. Do you accept it? Do you make goodness? Everything God gives us or we get, no matter how awful it is, there can be something really good that happens out of it. And for me, he got a good soldier now that gets to evangelize and share things that I would have never believed I've done or seen and prayed with. We've seen so many. I don't call them miracles. I just call them God favors. But miracles, little children come to our prayer group, brain tumors gone. Seriously, illnesses, we pray with them. We pray with them in the Adoration Chapel in front of Jesus, because Jesus is the healer. I'm not a healer. Padre Pio, he can intercede, but it's Jesus who gives these amazing through the Holy Spirit. So we have a prayer group that meets the first Saturday of every month. When I was given it, the story of how I got the prayer group is crazy too. So someone showed up in adoration and they said something about Padre Pio prayer group. And I was leaving. I said, could you tell me where that is? And he said, it's in Broadview at the Church of Assumption. Why don't you come? It's the third Sunday of every month at 3:00. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go check it out. So I go in and I'm incognito, make no eye contact because I don't want anybody to know I'm here. And I go in the middle of the church and go in the middle aisle, in the middle row like, and don't say anything to anybody. And then the priest comes. At the time, it was Abbot Christopher Schwartz from the Benedictine Abbey. And I didn't know the difference between an abbot or a bishop because they both look the same in their hats and that. And he started the mass and I started crying. And then when he gave his homily, halfway through the homily, it wasn't Abbott anymore. I'm seeing Padre Pio up there. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with me? My eyes, what they're playing tricks on me. So after the mass, the abbot came down and he walked up to my aisle and he had to walk midway in the center of it. And he said, "We've been waiting for you." And I said, "Waiting for me for what?" He says, "Oh, we've been waiting for someone who has a sincere devotion to Padre Pio. It's you." I go, "Well, how would you know that?" He said, "Because Padre Pio came to me last night and told me you were coming." And I said, "Well, you definitely got the wrong person. I'm not that prayer person." I'm like, "No way." He goes, "Yeah, it's you." He goes, "Next month you're gonna come and share your story with us." I go, "Well, do you want to hear it?" He goes, "No, Padre Pio told me you're gonna share it next month." I said, "Okay." So then it was a few months afterwards that Abbott came to me and he said, "Cindy, I'm not feeling good. It's time for you to move the prayer group." At the time, there probably was about 35 people. And I said, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's time. Find a priest and find a church." He said, "I'm not feeling good." The next day, he had a heart attack and he never was able to come back. But he wrote a letter to the group and said that we're moving. And that last meeting at Assumption, if you talk about getting stoned to death, I would have been stoned to death because they were so angry that I was moving it. And it wasn't my order, it was through Abbott's order. So by the end of the meeting, they had a little relic of Padre Pio. They said, "Oh, that's mine." They had a statue of Padre Pio. "Oh, that's mine." They had a banner of Padre Pio. "That's mine." So I left with nothing but me. So I came home and then I was driving. I'm like, "Padre Pio, you got me into this. You better help me." Well, the next day I got 3 emails from, and I wasn't good on a computer, from people who had a relic of Padre Pio. And 2 were selling them. And one man, I just wrote that I just am now a new group leader of a prayer group. I got nothing. So he sent it to me and it was a little teeny tiny bandage. So I thought, okay, that's good. But once the computer knows you like something, you get flooded with that. So the next thing I got was email about a chalice of Padre Pio, which we could kind of start passing these around. And feel free, this is Padre Pio's glove. Feel free to put it on and pray with it. If you touch it to your holy cards, they'll become relics. So that's the glove. I actually had 2 gloves of Padre Pio. I have just given one away, which I'll explain later. And then recently from the Padre Pio Center in Ireland, I was able to give them, they wanted a relic of Father Solanus Casey. And so as a gift, they gave me a blood. This is a first class relic of Padre Pio. So anyhow, that's a blood stained bandage from Padre Pio. It might be like a chest bandage because he had these wounds. He had a side wound. So you could just touch it. You could pray with it. If you have rosaries or anything, touch your relics to them. So anyhow, so I get this person who wants, it was on eBay, and I don't do eBay. I don't do PayPal. Oh, okay. I'll try anything. I'll for both them. So I don't do eBay. I don't do it. I didn't know what PayPal was. And he was selling it on eBay. So I wrote to him and said, "I'm a leader of a Padre Pio prayer group, and there's no way that I could do eBay. How did you get this? Is it real? And he said that his wife was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And that before she wanted to go for treatment, she wanted to go to San Giovanni and pray at Padre Pio's tomb, which she did. And she prayed at the tomb, and on their way home, they stopped in Milan. And in Milan, at the museum, I may have the paperwork. I got one.
Give it a folder or something?
It's the round thing. It's the round case that was, the chalice was in?
Right.
No.
Oh, try to send me your chair.
Oh, it's.
To the other
you-
side.
Oh, here it is. I don't know if I remember to bring the paperwork, so you could, oh, I do, I have it. That's just a copy of it. But anyhow, there was a museum in Milan, and in Milan, that particular moment they were there, they were having an auction. And one of the items, the only religious item they had was the chalice of St. Pio. And so his wife said, I don't care if we have to sell the house, I want the chalice. So the auction started, the bidding started, and it was 900 euros, which in America is about $1,200. And they bought it. No one else bid on it. So they bought it, they brought it home. She went to her oncologist and her cancer was gone. So he felt that this would help pay for the trip. So he wanted to put it online. He said he wouldn't take any more than the 900 euros for it, not a penny more. So I took it to my pastor. I showed him the paperwork. I go, do you think this is real? He said, everything looks good, Cindy. I said, okay, because that's a lot of money. And so I said I was going to buy it. And he said, I'm sorry, but somebody else has offered the money for it. I go, please share my story with your wife and see what she says. And she said, no, let her have it. So my friends, being doubting Thomases, said to me, Cindy, that's not real. You know that's not real. You're just a sucker for this. I'm like, well, if I'm supposed to learn a lesson in Padre Pio, then I'll learn a lesson. But I truly believe that it's okay. So they said, at least find out their names and see if they're legit. And his name was Chris and her name was Tina. So I looked it up and they lived where they said they lived. His name was Christopher, but her name wasn't Tina, it was Faustina. So I felt that was a sign, like, this is gonna be okay. So I sent them the check and they mailed it to me. And the day they mailed it to me, it was on Ash Wednesday it came. I was so afraid to open it. I was terrified. So with another friend, we opened it together and inside was an image of Padre Pio holding the chalice, which I have stuff on my phone I could show you afterwards. So I figured, okay, that was good affirmation. Many miracles have happened. And in probably at least 6 years ago, a Philippine priest used it in Philadelphia for a medical convention. And at Mass, Padre Pio's chalice, after the consecration, they went to purify it. There was an image of the crucified Jesus in it, and it lasted for over a year. And anyone who looked in the chalice, it's not there anymore, but who looked at that chalice saw crucified Jesus with the Holy Spirit. And that's really what the chalice, it's not about it being Padre Pio's chalice. It's about what contained in that chalice, which was Jesus's precious blood. So that chalice has been used by many bishops. It's been used all over the world. I promised when I got it that I would allow as many priests to use it as possible, and it has been used. We're going to have it refurbished because it's really gotten bad, and they're, through permission of the Capuchins, they're allowing me to have it replated and that, so you're probably the last one that's gonna see it like this. So we got that. So then, how did I get the glove? Am I talking too much? Like, what time is it? How'd I get the glove? I got the gloves. Anybody ever hear of Father Solanus Casey?
Yes.
Okay, well, I had heard about this brother Richard, who is part of Father Solanus Casey. Actually, he's a relative of Father Solanus Casey. And through a mutual friend, they kept saying, you got to go up to Michigan to go see Father Solanus Casey and meet Brother Richard. And I'm like, yeah. I should tell you, our group has over 950 members now. And I have opened, I can't tell you, maybe 12 Padre Pio prayer groups throughout the world. I'm working on one right now that's going to be starting in Staten Island, hopefully, if everything works out well. But anyhow, so I went to do a talk in Toledo and I got there late and they were showing the movie, so it was real dark. So I'm sneaking in, I saw a chair, I grabbed the chair, and when the lights went on, there was a Capuchin priest sitting next to me. And I looked at him and I said, oh, hi, Father. He goes, oh, no, I'm a brother. My name is Brother Richard Merling. And I'm like, you're Brother Richard Merling? He goes, who are you? I said, Cindy Russo. You're Cindy Russo? Because people kept saying, meet Cindy Russo. Well, we became great friends. And I actually took him with us on a pilgrimage to Italy in 2016, the year of mercy. He got me the privilege of going through all the bars, all the gates. No one was allowed to. I was allowed to go and kneel right at Padre Pio's tomb. And he's like a real brother to me. So then came the beatification of Father Solanus. He ended up getting us 60 VIP passes. We were right behind the priest for Father Solanus Casey's beatification. And afterwards he said, Cindy, come see me tomorrow. And when I got there, he said, here, these are for you. And he gave me the gloves. These gloves were Father Dominic Myers in the 50s. He was a secretary for Padre Pio, and he could speak 5 different languages. And when he went home, as a gift, they gave him 2 pairs of gloves. And Brother Richard gave me through, he was given to him by somebody else who was given to Brother Richard, and he gave them to me. And it's very rare that Capuchins would allow them out of their order. But he said, you're doing so much good work with them that, because I kept borrowing them, he says, you keep them. And so I do. I share everything I get, I share. And just recently, I was told at the priest that just got all ordained in May. One of them is my spiritual son. His name's Father Anthony Donatelli. Actually, he's going to be our main celebrant this Saturday at our prayer group. But I told during his first mass, he requested the chalice for his first mass. And he's my spiritual son. And I was told that the second glove needs to go to the seminary. So I gave one of the gloves I had to Father David Blind. Anybody know Father David Blind? And so he's the guardian of the second glove. And ironically, he came to my house. I didn't even know it was his anniversary of his ordination. So he's like, you're giving me this gift on my ordination, because he loves Padre Pio. So again, all good. What other? The other relic came from, I said, from Dublin, Ireland, and it was through a priest who asked me for a relic of Father Solanus Casey, which Brother Richard did. And in Thanksgiving, he gave me that glove. So the blood-stained is a first class. And I consider the chalice first class because it's got Jesus's precious blood. And then the glove would probably be a second class relic. So that, I could share a couple more stories or
Yes.
no? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I also have probably not enough, but I met Father Andrew Apostoli from EWTN. Holy, holy, holy priest. And I went there at the shrine of Fatima when he was alive. Never met me, knew nothing about me, but had requested I bring the chalice because he had a devotion of Padre Pio. And so he did. He used the chalice and oh, I found this interesting. Before Mass, their sanctuary where they were getting vested and everything was down in the basement. And the usher came and said, Father wants to see you. Well, when anybody tells you somebody wants to see you, I always think I'm in trouble. So I went down there and he said, Sydney, I want you to pray with all the priests today before Mass. And I don't know, I'm kind of old school and I don't think women should be in that room. And I'm like, Father, I'm a woman. He goes, I know you're a woman. You know, Mary was with Jesus's apostles a lot. I'm like, okay. So I prayed with them. And then afterwards, the usher came and said, Father wants you to share your story with the reporter. They're going to record it and publicize it in Soul magazine. So my story, this is just copies that I have the magazine at home. So my story is on here. And then they did a second story about the chalice. And it's funny because the image of Mary appeared, and you could pass that around.
Oh, wow.
The image of Mary appeared on the chalice. So again, yeah, you'll see the image of Mary appearing on the chalice. And I have in my phone, I could show you the image of Jesus. So I just gotta share a couple more things. During this whole encounter, I've learned a lot. Padre Pio is the one who brought me to become Third Order Franciscan tertiary. And as Leanne said, we did the journey together, and she'll tell you, I didn't have a clue, but Padre Pio kept pushing me. One of his favorite women her name was Mary Pyle, and she was a Third Order Franciscan. So I believe Mary is with me, and I ask for help with her a lot. There's another author, which I highly recommend if you like your story, what you read. It's by Susan DiBartoli. She has written Welcoming the Christ Child, Padre Pio. The one that we're going to do this fall, it's called Welcoming the Holy Spirit. It's excellent. And then we did in the spring, Carrying the Cross with Padre Pio. And Susan has come to our group. We've become friends. I stay at her house now. And she is part of the cause of the sainthood of Mary Pyle. So it's all connected. And she owns a travel company that I'm using, and it's called Little Flowers. So while I was driving, I'm on the phone saying, you'll never guess where I'm going. And she said, where? I go, Little Flowers. She goes, oh, it's going to be a good one. And I said, I don't know what book, but wouldn't it be funny if it was yours? But it's not. But anyhow, another great story I love to share. So I received in Vandalia, Illinois, at Father Peter Rookie's chapel, a scapular of Saint Michael the Archangel. And it's really unusual. And I've been to the cave of Saint Michael, and I got consecrated, and the priest who consecrated took it out of the package, put it on me, and he laid his hands, and I took an oath to Saint Michael. So I come home and nobody's got a scapular like this. I really like the scapular. And the next day I got called to Metro Hospital. A man was sick, part of our prayer group. He had an appendix that burst. And when they went to go take care of that, he had a stroke. So by the time I got there, he was in a coma and in serious condition, grave condition. And I put that chalice on him, hold it in his hands. And as I started to pray, he raised that chalice in his hand. And the wife is looking and his daughter's looking. And for 10 minutes, he kept it there as though he was consecrating it in a coma. So I put it back down and I said to her, Carmi, I want to tell you, I think he's going to be okay. And, they were crying because there was no life before this. And I said, however, do you have a scapular for him? And she said, no, I don't have one. So I had to take off my scapular that I loved and I put it on him. So I was driving home and I'm talking to Jesus, like, you give me things and then you take them away. I really like that. Well, the next morning I got up and I went to pump gas at a get-go. And as I pumped gas, I just gotta move again, sciatica. As I pumped gas, I went to pay, get my credit card. What was in my purse? A scapular. And I looked at it, I opened it up, I put it on, I said, thank you, Jesus, because I am privileged. I know I am. I'm no special than anybody else, but he sure shows me that I am. And so I was so happy I got this cap St. Michael because I've never seen one before. 2 days later, I get a call, Cleveland Clinic, and it's another person from our prayer group, and their heart's beating too fast. And they got to do the defib, whatever, to slow the heart down. So they're going to start the heart and stop it again. So I had a relic of Padre Pio, and he said, this will be my 5th time. Odds get worse and worse every time they do it. I'm like, okay. So I prayed with the relic of Padre Pio, and I got done, and I said, do you have a scapular? No. So again, I have to give away the scapular. And I didn't want to. And I'm thinking, mental note, buy some regular scapulars, So before I left, I said, I'm not a nurse. I don't know anything medical, but I don't think you're going to have it done. I think your heart's fine. So on the way home, I'm praying to Jesus, like, you give it and you take it away. And I get a call from his wife that they just checked and his heart went back into rhythm. So he didn't have to have it done. So the next day I went to Hartville. Everybody go to Hartville?
Yeah.
And there's a religious shop
Mhm.
and Celeste. I walk in and she goes, Cindy, I've been having dreams about you. I'm like, what? She goes, 3 days in a row, you and the Blessed Mother. And I said, I'm honored, the Blessed Mother. And she said, I go, what did she want? She said, you are supposed to make these brown corded rosary scapulars. For this day and age, she's asked everyone to pray the rosary and to wear the brown scapular. So she drew this drawing and she said it has to be brown corded and it has to have a Benedictine medal on it. And it's got to be out of this cord, and explained the medallions and everything. And I had always heard that it had to be what the scapular has to be. It's not wool. But when I went to Mount Carmel in the Holy Land, they had these too. So I knew I was doing okay. So I said, okay, well, I can't make them. So she drew it for me. She said, this is what, in this day and age for protection, this is what she wants you to do. I said, okay. So I took them to my rosary making people who are so beautifully talented, not I. And I showed them the diagram and they said, okay, I think we can make these. So they made me a prototype of a black one. I said, okay, it looks good. Just order brown cord. And I put it in my pocket. Well, 2 days later, I was meeting with my spiritual director and he said, Cindy, have you ever thought about making brown corded rosary scapulars? I'm like, who told you? Who told you this? He said, Cindy, I had a dream and this is what you're supposed to make. So I pull out the black one. He goes, no, it's gotta be brown. He says, but he said, you gotta put a Padre Pio medal on. So it's gonna be your signature from your group. So I do have some available and we make these go all over the world. I give handfuls. We sell them for $10, but I give handfuls to all my priests. And I'll say, and they wear them. And I said, when you go see the sick, you take yours off and give it to the sick. You could always put another one on, and they do. So these I've been given all over the world, and I suggest that for you. The other thing I have is our group has relics of Saint Michael the Archangel stones. I don't know if you've ever seen these. This comes from Monte Sant'Angelo, which is about a half hour from Padre Pio's hometown. And many, many times, starting in the 500th century, Saint Michael would appear and many miracles would be happening. And also, Saint Francis of Assisi went there, but he didn't feel worthy to even go in the cave. So he sat outside the cave and he carved a tau cross right at the entrance of the cave. So I do have these available as well. And I promote these. I give these to priests. Priests pray with other people with them, but they're for protection. And in this day and age, we all need protection. So Padre Pio's been very good to me. I could go on and on about stories. They just, every day is another story about Padre Pio. But I want to share with you, and Leanne told me to share, so it's your fault. We are going to be going on a pilgrimage to Bartow, PA in September on Sunday, the 7th and the 8th. I have a bus already full, but you are welcome to carpool with each other. We have a hotel and we'll be going to Bartow on Sunday, which is a mini San Giovanni. It's built exactly like it. And we'll have mass, we'll have tours, we're going to have a lunch there. And then back at the hotel, we're staying at a Marriott. I'm having a big catered dinner. The next morning, we'll have breakfast. We'll go and for 6 hours, are you ready for this? We will have a retreat with Padre Pio's third cousin, Father Pio Mandato, holy hermit. He only comes out for missions and for healing and retreats. So if any of you are interested, I could send you the information. And as I said, we make no money on it. So if you're one person, I don't have my phone. It's just exactly what the food is in the hotel. I mean, oh my.
Application, bring the day, but we have the retreat.
Oh, you have that?
Yeah, she,
I made copies,
Oh, thank you.
stapled them together
Okay,
and have them available. And
okay.
white envelope.
yeah.
Thank you, because
Thank you.
I should have did that. So if any of you are interested, it'll give you the address where to mail. Can you say how much it is? Because I always forget. Do you have a form?
160.
Yeah, double occupancy. September 7th, a Sunday, and the 8th is the Blessed Virgin Mary's feast day. And to get Father Pio Mandato as your retreat master, you aren't going to get much better ever. And he's a Gagliardi. So, but thank you. I mean, I could share many, many stories of Padre Pio. If you have any questions, and
Are these for prayer requests?
yes, please. I'm